What's going on, everyone? So as of recording this video, we got the Galactic Championship in about 4 days. So I figured I'd do another video talking about some more lists that you all might want to check out. A few of these are sort of the A tier category that I think are going to be pretty popular that people want to try out for the Galactic Championship. And in some cases, these are just staples that people view as a little bit weaker than they were, but I still think are quite strong. And we'll get to those in just a moment. And in some cases, maybe a little bit of a sleeper hit, but we'll dive into the 5 lists today, and I'm sure there's a lot more. And to be honest, there is several lists you could probably play and have totally a solid shot at winning the whole thing just because the meta is so open right now. With that said, a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, guys. Can't wait to meet you all in just a few days. But let's dive in right now with the first one on our list. For our first one, we've got Kylo Green. Now, this one's interesting. I made a leader tier list, and I did put Kylo Red in sort of that B tier category. But I think this is one of those ones where initially that was kind of just, okay, how is he performing right now against what I've seen? And that's where he's slotted in. But I think this is one of those ones that's a pretty big sleeper, depending on what the meta is going to shape up to be. Now, I made a full video on Kylo Green the other day, and this is just the list that I pulled over from there for the most part. But I think there's a couple different ways you can build him. One of them is the Kylo Ren Data Vault, getting advantage of that extra HP, which is going to really help you out against the more aggressive decks. It's going to really boost your win rate, especially with that 8 extra HP, because Kylo Ren's one big struggle is some of the more super aggro decks. However, this version, in that you're not going obviously all in, but rather playing a little bit more value, control, command, villainy with vigilance, and then using Kylo Ren as another late game win con. Just another one that's really solid, especially with things like craving power being acting as like a little removal option, especially since you can play Anakin with some heroism cards, and well, he becomes one of the most disgusting cards in the entire deck. We got the timely Darth Vader combination. We got a lot of things going for him, and really it can do a lot of work, especially against those mid-range decks. Having a leader that's not only going to prevent all damage on the ground, but also make it so that you can do some really awesome things that turn the leader itself not only as a powerful threat, like let's just say Anakin as an example. Yes, he is a powerful threat, oftentimes like a 6-7 overwhelm. Okay, but that's all he is, a 6-7 overwhelm. Well, Kylo Ren's like a 7-7 sentinel, but then also comes with, you know, like the craving power that knocks out a unit. And I know this uses another card, but it's a card that's in your discard pile, so it gives you a little bit of card advantage in that way. And Kylo Ren also makes your deck a lot more consistent because he shrinks down. Even though it's Data Vault, he does shrink down the list by discarding a lot of the upgrades in the list. So lots of really cool things to go with Kylo Ren. And just in general, because the leader is such a powerful threat in of himself and can block the ground arena, you can do some cool things, especially with the sideboard. Something like Shadowed Intentions can make it really obnoxious for some decks to deal with, and really just kind of put a wrench in their game plan. But again, one of the high value units of this list just makes it so that, you know, you got Anakin, Kylo, all these units coming down and immediately doing something to impact the board. Now, because you are trying to play upgrades as well as the command, control, vigilance, villainy strategy, it's a little bit harder to play a bunch of cheap villainy units to get advantage of the original Darth Vader, I found. But again, you can go with another version, which is the Kylo Ren ECL, which I think a lot of people are going to try out. That gives you the ECL Vader, obviously still playing Anakin if you want to, but you also have like ECL Gideon and some other options that makes it a little bit more of an earlier value deck. And then Kylo Ren's like your finisher, and that's going to really put you in a winning spot. So lots of cool things with this list, and I think this one's going to be a real strong one to contend with. The next one's gotta be the Obi Blue. Now, I think Obi Red is also a very interesting one. I've seen more Obi Blues out in the open, so I'm expecting more of those. But I could definitely see people running the Force Throw Obi-Wan Red version. Regardless, Obi-Wan as a core with the command portion is what you're really taking advantage of. Now, the nice thing about Obi-Wan Blue is that you do get that Jedi Consular turn 1 into immediately potentially playing a 5-drop on turn 2. That can be the, you know, the blue leaders, the Torrent attacks, those types of cards, which I do think are pretty strong. You got Chirrut in this list, which is amazing to just be a massive Sentinel body, especially in Obi-Wan, because it can turn into a 4-6 Sentinel, which is super obnoxious. You've got things like Yaddle, Gunji, Battlefield Marine, and all these types of cards. And again, this is not not the perfect list. This is just a bunch of kind of an amalgamation of things that you could be playing in Obi Blue as an option, and this is just a solid one in of itself. You've got, in my personal opinion, I think Axe Wolves is an amazing addition to this deck, especially if you're able to go turn 1 some sort of unit into turn 2 Axe, giving an experience token, turn it into a 5/5 shielded is amazingly solid. You got the General's Blade situation going on. You got a lot of powerful late game Kelleran Becks, Lukes, home ones, Yodas, makes it such a powerful late game contender as well. But as I said, you put a lot of pressure on your opponent with things like Obi-Wan, one of the best cards from the new set, Gunji, Battlefield Marine, Yaddle, all these kind of obnoxiously difficult units to deal with, and then pumping them up to really be even more obnoxious. This list is just more about the value plays you can make alongside the game. Now, you do have a lot of interaction because of the vigilance side of things. As I said, the Sentinel with Chirrut, Shatterpoint's a nice removal option that just kills anything. If you were going to go for the aggression side of things, you've got Force Throws, Adi Gallia, even things like Kiadi Mundi to draw you some extra cards and get you into that late game even further. And you can definitely do some major value plays in general. I just think Vigilance is a little bit more consistent with the Virgin's Temple, providing you immediate value on turn 2 and guaranteed to really take advantage of things like Jedi Consular. But the aggression, as I said, is a nice option. You've got the Force Throw, which everyone is waiting to see if it's going to be an oppressive card. But also, like I said, Kiadi Mundi is an amazing addition, and Mace Windu at the top end of your curve is awesome. Honestly, like I said, Obi-Wan Blue is the one that I've seen more of, but Obi-Wan Red is very much, if not equal in power, one of them is more advantaged. And honestly, the command, aggression, heroism side of things has been extremely powerful. So I wouldn't doubt it for a second if you saw some Obi-Wan Red approaching as a contender in the Galactic Championship. The next one is definitely the one that I would play had I not been bringing what I consider to be one of the better lists in the tournament, and I have the cards for, and that is Gar Yellow. This is definitely one of the most solid, like, A tier lists, maybe even higher than that, but in general, you just have so many new additions from the new set that are excellent, or I shouldn't say so many new additions, but a couple of new additions that make the deck truly excellent. You've got Secretive Sage, Axe Wolves, and Shin Hati all coming in with shield tokens, all boosting the power up, which just is exactly what Gar Saxon wants, right? This allows you to have now a total of 9 3/2 shielded units on turn 1 without playing Dr. Evazan. And as I had mentioned many times before, Dr. Evazan is very risky play, especially if your opponent's playing like Kira or Kylo and they just go turn 2, power the dark side, immediately can follow up with another 3 cost play like Super Laser Technician, Resupply, or Dr. Pershing. That just is a nightmare scenario for you, right? So Dr. Evazan, really risky to play, especially in the current meta. And so having the 3/2 shields on turn 1 is amazing. Then you couple that with Director Krennic with some explosive early turns like Inferno 4 and Greedo getting resource cost reductions. You could potentially play Director Krennic plus Greedo, which is 6 power on turn 1. You got things like Hotshot Blaster from the resource pile coming in and pumping up your units. And just overall, every single unit is tough to deal with, assuming your opponent doesn't have hard removal, right? Shin, 7th Fleet, Axe, Secretive Sage, Crafty Smuggler, Krennic, all of which have shields, which is super obnoxious. And then, of course, you have like things like Snapshot Reflexes, which on Axe Wolves is +2/+2. You get a little bit of removal and interaction with Power of the Dark Side. You've got some smuggle value with Covert Strength, Hot Shot, and Long Pike. And you even have things like Shuttle on turn 2 with Director Krennic. I have been really impressed with Shuttle, especially since you can move that shield token however you want. Remember, you can get shield and then move your Shuttle shield token to another unit, which can be pretty powerful. Gideon as the top end of the curve. This is just a solid list. I think there's an interesting conversation between the new Darth Vader and Xian Flurry versus not. In my experience, it's a fun combo, but it has been a little bit expensive, right? 7 resources, and by that point, usually the game is decided, and it's not going to bring you back in the game if that's the only thing you've got. So you could definitely try out with it, but that's been my experience. And I know a couple of people, my patron, that I spoke about the other day, and they have held the same thing. So, this is definitely a list that you could definitely try out. And I have had very big praise for it ever since the new set has come out. You got some really cool things in the sideboard, things like Commandeer, which are still pretty good, especially if your opponents have any of those space hits. It could be a nice option. No Glory, which could definitely take advantage of some units like K2SO if people are playing that, which is much less common, but still an option. A little bit of hand hate, a little bit of shield token, and exhausting, all of which are very, very excellent. But this is actually more of like an aggro list than anything else, which is kind of fun, and it can definitely do explosive work in a lot of games. We've got Quinlan Red next, and this is one that's probably no surprise to a lot of you out there, and really just a high value list. But I do think people are going to be, maybe, I wouldn't say sleeping on Quinlan, to be honest. Kylo is one that I think people are going to be sleeping on, but Quinlan in general is one that people have seen so much of from set 4 and didn't really get a crazy about from set 5, that I think people are like, nah, yeah, I don't even want to bother with playing Quinlan. But I think he's still really excellent, and there were a couple of new additions that I do think are quite good in the Quinlan deck. Now, I still think you're going to be running Tarkin Town, which means you're not going to take advantage of the force synergies that people have, but one of the new plays is the Obi Blue. People who do play a lot of events is extra damage. That little 1 to 2 points of damage can actually matter, but it's also just a 2/4 with the force tag, so it's going to work with force throw. You've got the new Quinlan. This can work really nicely with the surprise strikes that you're playing, and just pump in a ton of damage. You got the new Depa Balaba. I think this is one of the better additions, just something that comes down and ambushes something, so you really at that point want something that's going to immediately impact the board, and Depa Balaba does just that. But realistically, this is like the same list that you were seeing before. The changes aren't really that crazy. Like, Quinlan could definitely be replaced with Kira. Depa Balaba could definitely be replaced with some other ambusher, or just in general more early game / event plays. You can play Obi Blue, or you can play some other 2-drop. Realistically, this is like the same core Quinlan list. You're still playing the force throw, you're still Tarkin Towning, and that's the real advantage of this, is that there are a lot of decks out there that you can abuse if they're trying to set up the force, and then you do Tarkin Town early. It can be quite nice. However, one of the best plays on turn 1 up against Quinlan is like a Gunji, because you can actually just deal 1 damage and then Tarkin Town it away, which makes things a lot more tricky and not as disruptive for Quinlan. So something to think about. You get a nice access. Honestly, Cunning Aggression is an amazing combination to be in. For the sideboard, you got Bamboozles, you got Disabling Fang Fighters, some really nice options there. Bamboozle is going to be a really nice one, I think, in this format. General's Blades running pretty rampant. Some other upgrades. You got Kylo's now in the format. Bamboozle is going to be a nice sideboard card. Couldn't even run it in the main deck. But this is just a solid list. One of the few Tarkin Town lists still running around, similar to Cad Bane. But I do think this is going to give you a good shot at winning some games at the Galactic Championship. And lastly, we've got Anakin Blue. Now, this is basically Han Blue, but in Anakin's version. Now, I do think Han Blue is going to be the stronger version, and it's going to be up there with, like, Han Blue is probably going to be the most played lists at the Galactic Championship. Probably. People are super excited about playing the new force synergies. I think Han Blue and Han Green are both amazing options to run for the championship, but most people, or not most people, a lot of people still have a soft spot for Anakin, and Anakin does attack on a different dynamic than Han does. The extra value you get from your units early on is quite nice, and most people, again, were really leaning towards Anakin Blue in the previous sets. I do think Anakin Green is another option, but again, it is basically just Han, except you have a different leader. And that does allow you some privileges in that some of the new units on turn 1 can be really nice, actually, and do some really nice value trading. For example, if you were to go Obi Blue or Yaddle, one of the new turn 1 plays, and your opponent goes Grogu on turn 1, well, suddenly your Obi Blue or Yaddle can actually knock out that Grogu, which is a nice kind of value trait, and that's kind of what Anakin does, right? So Secretive Stage, Yaddle, Obi Blue, all new turn 1 plays, all force based. You have like Jedi in Hiding, you have Chirrut, Ki-Adi-Mundi, all as force and payoffs early on in the game. But then you also have Mace Windu's later on to take advantage, and Shatter Points to take advantage of the force that you're generating later on in the game. High value list, lots of very good plays that come in and do something immediately. And one of the things that I do like about Anakin Blue is, well, you do have a nice selection of units to choose from to just kind of trade up in value. Some of the nice things in the sideboard, you do get that bombing run, which one of the aggression cards that I do think a lot of decks should be running, and you could even run it in more aggressive decks like Quinlan. But Vaders are going to really struggle up against bombing runs, which a lot of people are running now. You get things like Champs and Dula, more Chirruts, hand hate like Pillage. But overall, I mean, this is just going to be like your Han Blue list. You're going to play a lot of similar cards, a lot of similar force synergies. The difference is Han Blue can take advantage of cards that Anakin cannot. Things like Grogu and Ogdo Bogdo, for example. And of course, you still get that resource cost reduction on any unit you play. So it's kind of like, okay, do I want to be playing Han Blue, or do I want to take a little bit of a different route and play my Anakin Blue with a similar strategy, but just slightly different, right? That's kind of the idea behind this one. But I do think this is going to be a pretty popular one, as we've already started to see it in some of the tournaments, and it was a popular one from the previous set. But it's a little bit awkward because it does mimic Han Blue in a lot of ways. There's just 5 more lists that you all can check out. I do think if you're looking for one that's going to be pretty budget friendly, you're going to look at Gar Yellow here. The only card that I'm really like, oof, that's a heavy hit, is the Hot Shot Blaster. It is one of the better cards in the deck, so I would still recommend picking it up, but it is one of the more budget-friendly lists. Obi Blue, one of the ones that I think people are going to be bringing just because it's a new set 5 leader. Kylo, same thing, but also this one has a really interesting game plan up against the more mid-range value decks because your leader is so valuable. And then you also have Quinlan, an old classic that if you wanted to bring in, I'm sure you're going to do some good work up with Quinlan. Overall, in terms of the Galactic Championship right now, expect number 1 and number 2 lists that are going to be most played realistically are going to be like Kira and Han, I'd imagine, right now. I mean, Han by far, number 1. Han is going to be the number 1 most played. But I do think Kira is going to make a big showing just because of how dominant it was in the set 4 section of the game. And you also get that timely Darth Vader, which a lot of people are super excited about, or even like ECL Vader, which people are excited about. So with those, you're going to do some good work, I'm sure. But if you wanted to do something a little bit different, these are some more lists to try out, and they're going to have a good shot at winning some games. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all for the next one.